If you've ever asked yourself, why the hell am I like this? Then this series is for you. Welcome to the Wealth Detective series, where we are solving the hidden mysteries keeping you from wealth. Every behavior leaves clues, and every clue points to a story. And best of all, every story can be rewritten. So that's exactly why I created this series. And if you're new here, I am Angie, the Inner Glow Coach, and every week we will be cracking another money case, exposing the invisible beliefs behind overworking, undercharging, guilt, scarcity, impulse shopping, self sabotaging, because your bank account has been leaving clues all along. And my goal for this series is to give you the clues to start uncovering the subconscious money stories behind your behaviors, begin to rewrite them, and then start making decisions from intention instead of autopilot. So, if you're the kind of person when your boss says, "What salary were you hoping for?" And then instead of saying the number that you practice in the mirror a gazillion times, you knock off 10 grand because you don't want to sound greedy because you feel all weird and awkward asking for more. So if that sounds like you are in the right place. And I know that sounds extreme, but I've done that. I've witnessed other people doing it. And it's not that you don't consciously want more money, it's that your subconscious beliefs are sabotaging your behaviors. And that's exactly what we're going to get into in this series. And also, if you're new here, all of my videos have an action item at the end. And that's because this isn't just about information. Information is everywhere. There's a gazillion self help books, there's a gazillion other YouTube videos. Information is everywhere. Google, everywhere. But you don't make changes in your life until you take massive action. And by massive action, I'm not talking about, it doesn't have to be a big production. It just has to skirt the edge of your comfort zone every single time so that you're gradually increasing your capacity for feeling the fear and doing it anyway, or feeling the uncertainty and doing it anyway. Because the truth about successful people is that it's not that they don't feel fear, it's that they don't let it hold them back from taking action. So, by proving to yourself that you can do the scary thing and you're capable of handling it and you can do hard things, that slowly starts to rewire your brain. Because your brain is an amazing organ. You can literally reprogram it. There are scientific studies about people who they're pessimist and they can literally reprogram their brain to be optimists and always look at the bright side, which totally changes your quality of life. So, this is about taking massive action. And I'm never going to ask you to do something that's so scary that your nervous system and subconscious is going to freak out and never do it again. All I'm asking you is to get out of your comfort zone, because that is where the magic happens. And also, if you're new here, I live in Hawaii. I've lived here for 8 years. I'm originally from Chicago, so I do have a Chicago edge. Like when I get passionate about something, I feel like sometimes I can sound angry, but I'm just passionate. So I do have a Chicago edge, but I am very empathetic and compassionate. So I always follow it up with a Hawaii glow. And I talk about my story in many of my other videos, so I'm only going to touch on it lightly here, but I'm going to highlight the things that are impactful and relevant to this series. And just to be clear, when I talk about myself, it's not to talk about myself, it's to provide you with examples and also like how I know that the stuff that I talk about works, because before I ever started practicing it on clients where it has also worked, and I'll also sprinkle in client stories, I did this all in my own life. So that's how I know it works. And shameless plug, if you're interested in the details of my personal life, I have a book. It's called Running in Slippers. It's extremely raw and vulnerable. And the reason I wrote it that way is because I feel like sometimes we go on, well, a lot of times we go on social media, everything's all filtered and edited. Even in real life, people are putting on their happy face, pretending everything's fine. You have other people on YouTube who like seem like they have it all together. And life is hard. And I've had a really hard life. And I wrote a book about it. And I wrote about the hard moments because if I can do the stuff that I talk about, anybody can do it. Because again, your brain is an amazing thing and you can literally reprogram it. And I don't even remember why I went off on this tangent. Oh, because I'm about to tell you a small personal story about myself, but the deeper story is in my book, Running in Slippers. And I also have a playlist here on YouTube where I go in deeper to some behind the scenes stuff on Running in Slippers. So you can also check out that playlist. But this playlist is about rewriting your money stories, and I'll get to how they form in a minute. But my personal story with this is from a very young age. Well, the short version is I grew up with emotionally unavailable parents. So, as a result, I became a people pleaser and a perfectionist, and I was constantly seeking love, approval, validation, and everything outside of myself because I truly had a belief that I didn't believe that I was worthy of love. So my deepest inner wound was worthiness. And so early on in my life, that looked like being a straight A student because the school system is very black and white. It's like you study, you take a test, you get a grade, you move on to the next grade. And so because that was a system my brain could wrap its head around, I did very well at gaming the school system. And I was a straight A student. I would get all the rewards and validation from being a straight A student, which, by the way, the school system doesn't reflect real life at all. So that didn't prepare me for shit. But I got all the validation in school. And I also received some intermittent validation from my parents for getting straight A's, which was also helpful for me because I was desperate for my parents' love and approval. But then as I got older, this behavior, it just evolved into blindly following society's arbitrary rules, meaning I was just checking off all of the things that look good on paper, like going to college and I got a finance degree and I got the stable corporate finance job and I was making good money. And when I was living in Chicago, I had a nice condo, I had a nice car. I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to be doing to be successful and happy. And my LinkedIn profile looked amazing. But the problem was, I was miserable in my own life because I was living for everything outside of myself instead of asking myself what I actually wanted. And so the first time I ever remember being like, what do I want in my life was early 2018 because in 2017, my boyfriend broke up with me and my dad passed away. And that my dad passed away in February. So for the rest of the year, I was in this profound grief. And I was 30, how old was I? 37 years old. And I didn't feel my feelings. I overexercised, I underate, I overworked. I did all these things to numb my feelings because I didn't want to feel my feelings because I just felt so unworthy and shameful of who I was. And so I was in this profound grief and it was impossible not to feel my feelings. So I didn't even know what to do with myself. So the short version is I felt like shit for the rest of the year. And then the calendar turned to 2018. And I think I was just in this New Year's energy and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I was like, what do I want to do with my life? And also with my dad dying, he was only 63. So that also had me questioning my own mortality. And I was like, life is too short to not do what you want to do. So what do I want to do? I had always wanted to move to Hawaii. So I was like, I want to move to Hawaii. Well, the problem was, first of all, this was at a time before remote work was not the trendy thing to do because this was 2018. And also, because I was a finance nerd, I did all the research and because I was very committed to this decision and I had a friend who lived in Hawaii and I knew the nature of people moving to Hawaii was transient, meaning a lot of people think they're moving to Hawaii and it's just going to be like this vacation. And the reality of living here is not the same as vacation. So a lot of people come here and then live here for 1 or 2 years and then leave. But I had a friend who lived here for many years and I would visit her. I understood the realities of living here and I was willing to accept them. So I was like, to prove that I'm committed and all in, I'm going to buy a condo immediately when I moved to Hawaii. So, but the problem with that is to buy the same condo, the same quality of condo that I had in Chicago, I needed 100,000 more dollars that I did not have. And so I had to rewrite a lot of my money stories, which we're going to get to that process and what that's all about in a minute. but I manifested $100,000 in 6 months. So that's one reason that I know that this works. And I do have that bigger version in other videos, including the running and slippers playlist. But so anyway, I moved to Hawaii, and then this is the very short version. I started my healing journey in earnest at the end of 2020 because I had a total emotional breakdown and I made this switch. I had been living my life in victim mode, meaning life was happening to me and I felt like I was hopeless against it. And I switched to, the way I've been living my life hasn't been working out. I want to live my life differently, and I am accountable for making that change. So I hired a coach, I invested in myself, I started doing the inner work in earnest, and that's part of a larger story. But part of that story is I realized how incongruent my corporate finance career was to who I was. Because again, I had just been blindly following the rules of society, never asking myself, what do I want? So that's how I ended up, and that's a whole story on its own. I quit my corporate America job cold turkey. Not cold turkey. I gave myself 3 months to I had to get to the point where I could think about quitting my job without having an anxiety attack. And that took more rewriting of money stories, which is another reason I'm pointing this out, because there's a whole money story, rewrite story within that. But I was able to quit my job, and that's how I started my inner glow coaching business. So, those are two examples in my life. Those are the biggest examples where I had to rewrite my money stories. There are other smaller examples, but that is my short introduction to what I know about this. So, who is ready to rewrite their money stories? Because the example I love to use is if some stranger walked up to you on the street and was like, money doesn't grow on trees, rich people are greedy, and you have to hustle and grind and work yourself to the ground for money because you don't deserve it. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm from Chicago. I would be like, F you, a-hole, and keep walking. So, but you would probably ignore them, right? So, why is it that we live by some of those same stories just because our parents said them at the dinner table when we were 6 years old? Because think about it. Where do we first learn about money? Even if growing up, you go out in public and you see money being exchanged, even on TV and movies, you can see money, people talk about money, but the emotional baggage that comes along with it, we learn that from our primary caregivers in our home. So for most of us, this is our biological parents, but this is any adult who was your primary caregiver until you were 18. So it could be a step parent, it could be a grandparent. DNA doesn't even matter. What matters is the adults that you spent the most time around and what their stories were about money and their situations and their fears and their experiences. And the actual money stories, there's a gazillion different possibilities because everybody's situation is so specific and so nuanced, but they generally fall into two main categories. So, one category is the money stories that prevent you from receiving money. So, those are the stories like, I have to work really hard to deserve money, or wanting more money is selfish. And then there's the stories that prevent you from keeping and holding money. So receiving is only one part of the equation. But if you have stories that are like, if I become successful, then I'll be judged, then I'll be rejected, or I can't trust myself with money, or I can't trust myself with managing money, those would prevent you from keeping and holding money. And there's actually a third category which we're really not going to get into in this series. So I'll just touch on it briefly because maybe your family didn't even talk about money, which is equally as dangerous because then it becomes this taboo thing and you never learn anything about it. So this makes me think of the families that never talk about sex, and then those kids end up being the most sexually promiscuous kids in school because they don't know anything about it. So they want to like learn on their own, and it also feels they might get like this dopamine hit because it feels like exciting because it's forbidden and taboo. So that's a totally different dynamic, which we're not really going to get into on this series. But what this looks like in real life, I'll go back to my story. So, when I was a little girl, I dreamed of living in Hawaii and driving a red convertible. And the reason is because I don't know if I've explained this on other videos, but I had a Hawaii Barbie doll that had hair down to her butt. And for whatever reason, I found that to be so fascinating. And then I also had a red Barbie Ferrari convertible. So from a very young age, all I remember is just being obsessed with Hawaii and red convertibles. And whenever I would excitedly tell my parents of my dreams, they would always rain on my parade. It's too far away, it's too expensive. You need to have a really good job that pays good money. And even then, you have to work really hard at that job. And they would even say things like, well, red cars get more speeding tickets and insurance costs too much on convertibles. And I was like 8 years old. So, anyway, I didn't receive much support around these dreams, but the explicit message that I received was you have to get a really good job and you have to, earn a lot and work hard at that job. But the implicit message that I received was that it wasn't available to me because I don't deserve my heart's desires. So for decades, I didn't even think these things were ever possible for me because, like, as a child, I didn't understand that the way my parents treated me was because of whatever was going on with them. So I truly believed, like, I don't deserve to be loved. I don't believe I deserve my heart's desires. So even though, like, after 18, I'm technically not under my parents' care, these beliefs still followed me. I truly didn't believe these things were possible for me, even though there were other people living in Hawaii and other people driving red convertibles. My brain was like, nope, not available for me because I was just blindly following my parents' beliefs and I took them on as my own. And not only do our beliefs live in our subconscious, they live in our nervous system because our body remembers. I still remember exactly how it felt when my mom would rain on my parade, when I would excitedly tell her my dreams. And it was like, nope, can't do that, can't do that. And so for a long time, I didn't even think about my desires because I didn't want to feel that feeling of disappointment. And even deeper than that, I just felt so much shame. Like I want these things so bad, but I felt like I didn't deserve them. So it's like I didn't even think about them because they were also ingrained in my nervous system, that feeling of shame and disappointment. But the good news is our inherited money stories are not the truth. But these non truths, they run our life on autopilot until we rewrite them. And in general, running on autopilot is a scary state of being. So, for example, I think anyone who has had a driver's license has had this experience. Say you drive the same way every day, like you pull out of your driveway and you always turn right. But then one day you need to turn left, but then your body just automatically turns right. And I don't know about you, but anytime that has happened to me, it's actually very scary because I knew that I wanted to turn left, but my body and brain just did whatever it wanted anyway. Even before I recorded this video, I did a mic check, but I couldn't remember if I did a mic check. And I went back and checked my video when I did, but I didn't remember doing it because it's on autopilot, because that's just something that I do before every video. So, in general, I highly recommend a daily practice of pulling yourself out of autopilot and questioning everything you do and why you do it. And I've talked about this in other videos, and I know it sounds extreme, but I promise you, it will change your life. Like, even why did I say that? Why did I do that? Because those behaviors leave clues, and every clue points to a story. Even when you're brushing your teeth, because I don't know about you, but I have a automatic toothbrush, an electric toothbrush, and then it has the pulses that tell you when to switch quadrants. It is so easy to zone out because even the pulses become automatic that you can do on autopilot. You can completely dissociate while brushing your teeth with an electric toothbrush and still get all your quadrants. But I intentionally pull myself out of autopilot because, in general, I don't like being in that habit because when you're on autopilot, you're not questioning anything, especially the things that don't make sense, and that is so dangerous in today's society because I see so much herd mentality with people not even thinking for themselves. And I can go off on a whole rant about being an independent thinker, so I'll just cut it off there. But running on autopilot is especially scary with money because we don't consciously think. I have never heard anyone say, I don't deserve to earn more money. But we end up not negotiating our salary, not asking for a raise, not applying for the job just because you're not qualified on paper. I have done these things. I've witnessed so many other people doing these things, even though none of us had said out loud, I don't want more money or I don't deserve more money. And we also don't walk around thinking, I believe money is scarce, but we feel anxious every time we have a large unexpected expense. So, this is why information alone doesn't change your financial situation because you can read Think and Grow Rich or all the self help books, but those are written for the masses. And again, there's a lot of information in those books, but they don't really tell you how to take specific action in your life. So if you're just consuming them and then not really doing anything with the information, it's not going to change anything. Or therapy, I know therapy can be effective. It has not been effective for me. I know other people where it's not effective. And the reason why it was never effective for me is because, yeah, it feels good to talk to someone in the moment and it does give you some insight to why you're feeling the way you're feeling. But I felt like I never really had any tools to take out in the real world to actually live my life in a different way. Or, and I know this is polarizing, and just to be clear, I love woo woo shit, but a lot of the spiritual bypassing is based in woo woo because people are literally giving their power away to the thing. They're giving their power away to the candle or the crystal or the sound bowl. And it's like you have personal accountability for making changes in your life. And if you're not doing the inner work in conjunction with those things, the thing is never going to be the thing that rewrites your money story. And oh, and another thing that I feel very strongly about is affirmations. Affirmations can work, but they usually don't work because if you're telling yourself something that your subconscious truly does not believe, your subconscious just feels like you're telling yourself a lie. So if you're just like looking in the mirror, like, I am a money magnet, and your subconscious is like, well, I don't deserve money, you're just telling yourself a lie. It's like you can tell yourself all day that the sky is pink, but if it's blue, your brain isn't going to believe you. So, my entire point is until you identify the inherited money story quietly running the show on autopilot, there is no strategy in the world that's going to stick long term because you have to reprogram your subconscious and your nervous system. And before we get into the action step, I am going to tell you one client story because I had several women come to me last year, and this is how I actually started my new program, the Inner Glow Overflow. They came to me specifically about abundance mindset. And so I had one client, she came to me, and so her original money stories were based in that worthiness and feeling like she didn't deserve money. And so within 2 months of working together, she got a new job on a different team in her company and almost doubled her salary. So this is what I'm talking about when I say you can reprogram your brain and rewrite these stories, and it may not always happen that quickly, but it happened very quickly for her. And she's a really cool case because once she had money, we also uncovered stories that she had about keeping and holding money, which I'll get to in that video. But yes, your stories can be rewritten, and I'll get to this in tomorrow's video. It's not just about money because I also had another client. She came to me after a breakup and she felt like love was not available to her. She would never find love again. And we worked on those beliefs behind relationships. And not only did she have dates lining up at her door, not literally, but she had so many date opportunities that she had to start turning people down. Not only that, but she got a new job at a different company that paid more. So it also affected her money. And we'll get into more of that tomorrow because how you do or the next video, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So this isn't just about money. This affects all areas of your life. So, I'm going to end video 1 there. And the action step for today, actually, I'm going to give you 2. One is write down all of your conscious money stories because I definitely think you have subconscious money stories that you might not even be aware of. But like for me, one of the money stories that I had to conquer was my mom would always say verbally out loud that rich people are sinful, which falls along the lines of rich people are greedy, rich people are selfish because it's based in this scarcity mindset. And that's just an example. That was one I was consciously aware of. So write down all of your conscious money stories because when we get into the process of rewriting it, ideally you will go through that process for all of your conscious money stories. But then part 2 is there are probably other stories that you are not aware of. So the second action step is to start a practice of being aware of your behaviors. You don't even have to start questioning them yet. If you want to, that's fine. If you, for instance, say you impulse shop on Amazon, why did I do that? Because I was feeling stressed. I was feeling this. Why did I impulse shop and blah, 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 because I thought it would make me feel better. Just the simple step of this is just being aware of your behaviors. But if you want to, start digging into them, even if it doesn't lead anywhere, just being aware of the feelings, the thoughts, everything that's going on in that situation. So those are your 2 steps. And then in the next episode, we are going to start digging into our first investigation of the money stories that prevent you from receiving money and the identity of our top 3 suspects, because I want to introduce you into this concept of being an identity detective and looking at your behaviors as clues. So you don't want to miss it, and I will see you in video 2.